Hello, and welcome to Intimate Discourse. My name is Jason, and I'm a human being. This episode is the first in a series examining some of the singular attributes that define us as a species. It will also note how these uniquely human characteristics must be fundamentally incompatible with any artificial intelligence. While the series will mostly focus on us, human folk, and the various ways we instantiate these carbon-centric attributes, it will also initiate a wider debate into the logical, ethical, and philosophical implications of AGI, artificial general intelligence. This is possibly the defining issue of our times. As advances in AI continue, and as it becomes more and more embedded in our everyday life, it is crucial that the public become more involved in the dialogue surrounding it, or at the very least, more aware of the scope and scale of what's beginning to happen. It's a topic we, as a society and as a species, need to engage in soberly, honestly, and with a certain degree of transparency. While artificial intelligence has already done so much to improve our collective lives, there is a terrifying downside in placing too much faith in these technologies, or in the researchers and companies designing them. We must tread carefully, together, with eyes wide open. We must analyze the risks, weigh the benefits, and proceed accordingly. It is my hope that this series can play some small part in the wider discussion that needs to happen over the coming years. This first episode in the series, All Too Human, deals with remorse, and by extension, the apology. It was recorded on August 14th, 2022, in Toronto, Canada. Welcome to the show. My name is Jason, and I'm here with Dimitri.
Hello, everyone.
And we're going to be talking about apologies today. The evolution of the apology, the sort of related attributes of an apology, just all things apology. All apologies. That's what we're going to be doing today. So, ode to Kurt Cobain. There are so many places to start with this. I know it seems like a kind of a random topic, but there's actually a lot to it. So it's interesting. I like kind of exploring these things like we almost take for granted sometimes. Just personality traits and things like that. I think one of the most important things, and I haven't told you about this, Dimitri, but I think we should do this show as part of a series that we should do on distinctly human characteristics and contrast that with, because we, on this show we talk a lot about AI, and there's a lot of move right now by some big AI companies to just replicate like human behavior. And a lot of the problems with around like getting AGI, like artificial general intelligence, where you have like a robot that is actually thinking for itself and very much simulating human thought. You would there are it gets a little scary. And when you see like, so do you know the Turing test?
Yeah.
So
yeah, of course.
And so this idea of sitting an AI down or having a conversation with an AI and a regular human, and for a random observer to be able to decide which one is the human and which one is the AI, that's sort of the Turing test. So like in terms of like artificial intelligence, but as we get closer to that point where the average person won't be able to distinguish between the two, I think, and I still think we're a ways off for that. Like, just if you see some of the things that AI can do, like I don't know if you ever watched any of these YouTube videos, but they'll have like, they'll do like sort of interviews with an AI, and it will be like asking questions, and it'll say things like, is there a God? Is there? And you can tell just by their responses that this isn't like human thought.
Now, did you hear the news though about a month ago that I think some Google engineer tried to make the proclamation that the AI he was interviewing became sentient and
that seemed like a big publicity thing.
Yeah. Is he hungover?
I don't know. I know the guy too. It's like seeing. Well, it was a great way for him to get out there and start talking about things. I listen to them. If it's the same person I'm thinking of, because I remember that story came out and I was like, what is this now? And it's great clickbait. And, I clicked on a bunch of them. But I don't buy that. I mean, we could talk about that if you want, but I just mean it's, I don't think AI will ever be sentient, but at least not with,
And if it's not perceptible to us, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, there's a whole argument to be made there, but really, the funny thing is, like so many things, it comes back to your fundamental beliefs, and then you get into this, like, when you start putting belief into science, like injecting that, it becomes more and more subjective and more, it's like I always thought, like if I ever had a conversation with Richard Dawkins, I was like, because I do believe in God, but it's like I can't logically explain it. I can give you, I can talk you through my logic of it, because it's not just like a blind faith or whatever, but some of it's just so subjective, and I can totally understand why somebody who hasn't had the same experiences or isn't buying into the same sort of subjective criteria that I'm explaining, which is why I believe it. Then I like the atheistic response makes sense to me in a sort of empirical way. It just doesn't make sense
in a very two-dimensional, mechanistic sort of way. And I think that's the problem.
Exactly.
As far as we think we are advanced in these things, we're in such an infantile mode.
Yeah.
Right. To try to explain that which is more of an intuition or faith-based or lived experience,
Yeah.
So I do think we're moving forward, but it's hubris to think we're getting anywhere close to solving that problem.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, and of course with AI it becomes the question of, how far do we want to go? I think there's a ton of positive benefits to it. It's just that it's it just depends on the trajectory we take as a whole, as a society.
It's a tool.
Yeah.
Not a replacement for reality.
Right. But so all that being said, I think it's, we'll do a series of shows sort of highlighting attributes which I think make us distinctly human. And I think this idea of an apology is something that makes the idea of feeling guilt for something and having that sort of be the catalyst to apologize to somebody. I mean, in theory, this is how apologies are supposed to happen anyway. Yeah. But
I let somebody down. Could a computer AI feel like I let you down?
Yeah.
I told you, I really should have said, sell this stock at this price.
Even if they program that into some sort of AI, like you're not getting that feeling. I mean, I can't understand how it would be possible to get it. How complicated would the circuitry have to be, like the software circuitry, have to be for it to be actually having feelings of,
and if it doesn't
guilt.
mean it, then it's not real.
Yeah.
No matter how you perceive it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like, and that's, I guess, a lot of what apologies are, is like, there are a lot of insincere apologies, right? Like we've certainly seen it. And anyway, this is one of the things we're going to be analyzing today in terms of the apologies. But I do think that this is a sort of a distinctly human characteristic. It's something that if you're designing an AI, I can't imagine how you would design that. I would love to hear, artificial intelligence researchers tell, like,
it would almost have to be like the AI has its own life and grows up to know these things and just reacts naturally.
Right. Some sort of heuristic
growth curve.
Yeah. But yeah, because you can't. Well, I remember once I took this class where it was like a sci-fi. It was like it was at Ryerson actually. It was just it was a sci-fi, what was it, like on sci-fi authors or whatever? It was like sci-fi fantasy. It was just like I needed credits to do something. And so it was like the easiest class I've ever taken. But like when we were doing the Philip K. Dick, do robot, it was the Blade Runner. Yeah. Was the movie, the book, do robots dream of electric sheep or whatever.
Of course, yeah.
So we were talking about that, and we watched Blade Runner in there as well. And it was like, oh, and the question was put to the class. So, the morality of, do you kill an AI and this and that? And I stood up and I was like, to everyone's horror, said, yeah, I mean, I would probably, rape and kill the AI with no qualms whatsoever. And it was just like, because, they're not sentient. They're not human. Like, and I know that might seem like kind of a hopelessly naive kind of position to take, but they're not endowed with a soul, which is, I do believe in a soul. And I don't know what the soul is. That's like a catch-all phrase or whatever. But like, you're not, if humans are designing it, no matter what you put into the code, you're still left with something that is designed by humans, and we're not, I don't know.
So for you, it was as simple as, if I want to take a baseball bat to my car, it's a baseball bat to my car. I don't need to feel guilty about that.
Right. I'd feel more guilty about the baseball bat to the car. Yeah. I mean, it's
not
we
real.
have to remember that robots, it's just like when the robots take over, 30 years from now, I'll be the first one against the wall. But I do think that we have to sort of remember that, and putting it in those stark terms is like let's not romanticize this idea about what we're giving birth to here.
I'm with you. For me, it's just a tool.
It's a tool.
It's a tool, and to make it anything more grander than a tool is it's almost demeaning to the human experience.
Yeah.
And life in general. It's not life. It's a tool. It's a hammer.
Exactly. And I think it's an extraordinarily useful hammer. It is. Yeah. It's really the next evolution of, I just think of like 2001 and that kind of iconic moment where the ape has the tool and discovers how to use it. It's sort of the next phase of that, right? Like, but you have, I do think it's like, it's extraordinarily interesting. And I do think that as that tool, like when you start to get to the point where we've designed them and now they're designing other thems, and they become, there is this sort of like software-based consciousness in the sense that they are like, for all intents and purposes, their brain would be able to retrieve all the facts and all the, like, can you imagine? So can you imagine now if somebody you realize that you were, we go back to Battlestar Galactica. Say you realize you were a Cylon. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of existential crisis would that breed in you? Or would you just kill yourself at that point because it's like, well, I'm not real? Or would you feel real? I mean,
it's something like when you find out you're an orphan at 25, or you're adopted, not orphan, but adopted at 25. These aren't my real parents.
Yeah, it probably is. It's probably like a
nature.
minor version of that. But it's probably the same sort of
you
crisis.
Adapt and deal with it. I don't know. Yeah.
But I mean, for example, like if you thought you were, if you discovered you were a Cylon now, you wouldn't want somebody to kill you still, right? So there'll still be like a self-defense mechanism sort of built into them for their own survival.
Oh yeah. You're talking about super highly advanced levels though. I don't think we're anywhere near yet.
Yeah.
So theoretically, it's like Data in Star Trek. Like you just want to stay alive because it's real to you at that point, Sure.
I think that the presumption, though, of that...
But even though it feels real, it doesn't make it real.
Yeah. Right. Like, and that's the thing. We're talking about it as if it's like, we're talking from a human perspective, like, well, what would it be like for an AI to suddenly have that consciousness of, oh, I'm actually not real?
Yeah.
But I don't think that they would have it the same way. They wouldn't have that experience.
And inevitably, it isn't real. Like you're watching a movie and you're watching two people like act a really traumatic scene. But it's not real. There's a certain moment, but I feel it. I'm feeling emotions. These are really they're acting. They're embedding themselves into the emotions of it, but it's not real.
Yeah.
There's a moment where you say cut, and it's over. No matter how wonderful you've constructed that, either AI or a movie scene or whatnot.
But isn't there like a Twilight Zone episode or something where there's the characters in the movie, they find out that they're in a movie? Like it would be the same kind of thing. This is like.
You can find out whatever you want. You can perceive it from your subjective point of view, I think, however the person wants, but it doesn't make it real. It's kind of going back to pop culture today. My subjective experience versus objectivity. You can get into I feel like a man, but I'm a woman. So to my feelings, like you can go anywhere with this. I think there's a certain point you have to just go back to objectivity.
Yeah, I think that we have to, it's sort of like Newtonian physics. Like you have to have objectivity in the sense of just so you can make your way in the world and live a life, right? Like as if you start like getting too obsessed with like, maybe the quantum mechanical world or all these sort of like you can always question anything. Is this table really a table? Is this a pipe? Like,
How do I know if something exists on the other side of your coffee cup if I can't actually see the other side of the coffee cup?
Yeah, well, everything's made of like everything's made of like molecules and atoms, and the atoms are spaced so far apart. There's so much empty space. It's like, well, is it even real? Like, how is it like?
True.
So you could really go down, that proverbial rabbit hole, but it doesn't really help you in a sort of day to day. Like, there's an intuition to it where you're like, okay, like I know. Like this is real, and I can understand how an AI would be thinking differently from us. Like it wouldn't be having that same human experience of, oh shit, I just realized I'm not a human and not real.
Yeah, I've heard too. Like the way to prevent the robots from taking us over is simply treat them with absolute human respect from the moment we start creating them. So there's no reason for them to ever want to feel animosity towards the human species.
Yeah, I guess.
Right? From the very day, like now, we start with like, in our constitutions, this is life sort of thing.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's so like relying on like, like there will be a point probably fairly soon where, in so many different levels, AI is so much better than humans processing and whatnot. So it's like you ever get a situation where they're actually like making decisions and like making other AI, like it's just that will very rapidly, like I don't think our kind of the framework of our the morality that we impose on it I think there will be a point where it supersedes that, where it's sort of like if there's any kind of heuristics to it, it'll kind of be like, okay, well, for our survival, we have to do this,
Yeah.
or all it takes is one time for that, even if they're most of the time.
Well, you don't have to go too far now. You have like the green initiatives on Earth and that, and humans are a virus.
Right.
Program
Yeah,
that into some
yeah.
AI, and the ethical thing to do is to treat just like we treated, let's say, unvaccinated people. How dare they? Why do we tolerate them and take up space on this Earth? How far is it for AI to say, well, humans are the actual virus on Earth, and so for the betterment of the universe, we need to get rid of humans. So yeah, you can go anywhere with that. That's why we need to stay on top.
Right. Right. Yeah, we got to stay in control. It seems so like really naive, like to just like hopelessly naive to think that we can create this thing. Well, it's like a whole Pandora's box thing. So it's like we're going to create it, and it's like we've just created something that is going to be like exponentially more intelligent than us, but we'll keep it under control.
Yeah, exactly. Then I wonder, just like my sci-fi brain, will there be humans that side with the robots? And will there be then robots that actually feel sorry inside for the humans?
Gaius
They break
Baltar.
away.
Yeah.
What's that?
Gaius Baltar.
Yeah. And they'll just break away from the other hive-like AI structure. Like, no, I'm with the humans on this one.
Yeah. We're going to have some pretty interesting wars
That's
in the
pretty
future.
amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
And how will they apologize to each other?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's bring it back. So yeah, anyway, so that's the overall context here. So I do think that, so getting into apologies, obviously it's a uniquely human characteristic to feel that kind of regret and to express it in the form of like an I'm sorry and this and that.
I think it has to be lived. I like the way this conversation started, because jumping with AI, it really hasn't lived that life to feel regret. I don't know if you can program that in. It would have to be programmed in such a way that, like I said, there's a growth curve to the AI. Like the way you first release it in beta isn't the way it ends up. It actually naturally develops on its own. If you could do that, then we could naturally program in some self-taught morality where it actually feels regret.
Well, yeah, true. Because I need, but I mean, then I wonder if maybe there would be a case where it would just, you could embed experiences or something. So,
like Total Recall.
I don't know,
right?
One of those.
Take a vacation, you don't have to even leave. We'll just program the memories into you as if you had taken the vacation.
Yeah.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah. I do think with a lot of those things, when I'm trying not to get off topic, but like I do think a lot of those things are, we talk about these things hypothetically, like as if we'd be able to embed memories in, and as if we'd be able to, have kind of that vacation. I think it's kind of like, and I know I bring up the quantum physics stuff a lot, but I think there will be a point where we sort of think that these things are going to be possible because they seem in theory possible to us now if we just keep going forward. But there's a wall somewhere where it becomes impenetrable. Like where, you know, you might not, like you get to a point where you're like, it's almost like that's the barrier where it's like, okay, we kind of can't get around that.
I don't
that
know.
thing.
So I'll play counter to my point where I think AI should be limited, or it'll never make it. Because in the end, I think human creativity is limitless, and if we can just dream it, we can make it. The question is whether we should.
Well, maybe, yeah, I see. So
We can make anything given the right time.
well, yeah, maybe, but not really. Like we can't make a time machine.
We maybe can.
Well, but that's bound by, this is what I'm talking about. Like if you're bound by certain laws, like if you're bound by the speed of light, the maximum of the speed of light.
For now.
Right. No, I see what you're saying, but it's these are these kind of walls that I think come up where it's like, okay, like for example, the whole uncertainty principle. So you can't actually, like if you wanted to get really down into the muck with quantum physics, it's like, okay, well let's try, and this is, what they tried to do is like try to determine like position and momentum and like try to figure out, like in a classical world, it's like, okay, like in Newton's world, it's like, you could predict with accuracy, like where, as long as you knew where everything was and how fast everything was going, you could figure out like basically the whole fate of the universe. But because but if you keep going on a smaller and smaller level, you get to a point where you can't actually do that physically. So it's like, and if you can't actually do that, then it means that there is unpredictability built into the system.
You're not a god.
Right. Well, exactly. So that's sort of the blurring where it's like,
that's way out there though. Like,
no, but I mean, but it's the same thing with the time machine. It's like, okay, then, it's great to say, I mean, I know like tachyon particles or whatever, something that can go faster than light in theory or something like that. But if you have that limit where it's like nothing can go faster than the speed of light, and like how do you kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like you can say something is possible, but until we actually do it, it's really not possible. Like, so I guess that seems fairly like an obvious thing to say, but like, I know what you're saying.
I know what you're saying too.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so many infinite possibilities. Like for us to, we're talking like maybe like millions of years of human development to get there. That's an interesting thing about religion then, because it's kind of like the hack. It's kind of like, you don't need to do all that.
Right.
You can peek behind a curtain, your consciousness or whatever. We got you, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe that's sort of like the built-in, almost like mechanism that makes it a rigged game. Like the universe is infinitely big, and like you said, infinite number of possibilities in order to make time travel happen, that you just can never solve it.
Yeah.
And even trying to go down such a rabbit hole is something it's gonna what's the expression? Good intentions is the path to
road paved with good intentions.
Yeah, like maybe that's the thing. Like we're just it's almost rigged because there's just so many variables. You will never actually get to that end point. Don't even try that.
Right.
And then, in a sense, religion kind of comes in and goes, you don't really need to even go there. That's going to take up so much time and energy from the human species. It's a dead end.
Yeah.
You're not going to find what you're looking for if you go in that direction.
Yeah.
It is limitless and therefore impossible because it's so many, the algorithm is infinitely big.
Right.
You'll never solve it.
Yeah.
So don't try.
So, but then you get into like...
Or don't try too hard. Obviously you want a better quality of life and stuff, but don't throw all your eggs in that basket.
Yeah.
Actually, I do think that's true.
And yeah, like I that's... Because I think that there is sort of the God principle where it's like, I think that there is a bit of an, like, I say this with no proof and obviously like it's just an opinion, but like that God truly does guide things to some extent, like not in a way where it's like, necessarily he's showing up somewhere and like pushing something. It's like, oh, let's make the stock market go up a little bit today. But I think that there's some sort of intelligence that we don't understand that does guide certain forces that are, kind of like okay, like we definitely don't want the Nazis to have the atom bomb first. Like, you know what I mean? Like certain like things that nudge things along.
Interventionist God versus sort of the prime mover. Like the only miracle that ever happened was the beginning of time, and everything that has come since then is a miracle, but from the original miracle, and it cascades forward.
Right. Yeah. You
don't say, God bless you, and he stops, and just turns around and gives you your blessing and move on sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever solve that one. It could be, why can't it be a bit of both?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's not something we'll ever understand. But I will say, if AI does get to the point where they're like, really, because of the speed of computation and this sort of exponential learning that can go on, maybe they can solve some of the problems that maybe they can. You were talking about like complex problems, and we'll never be able to find things out. Maybe some things will be able for sure, because like just the amount of computation they can do, it would, like, the problem couldn't be something that, like, right now as humans we have a problem with, like, for example, finding like encryption. Encryption works because humans can't calculate so many iterations of like calculations or whatever. So it's like, so that's why encryption works. But if you have an AI that is able to, I mean, I guess encryption is a bad example because you're talking about really large numbers, but eventually AI, the speed of computing power, actually you don't even really need AI for that, but like computing power and AI combined, just anything that is a computational problem will be solved. But it's like things that are a little more like complex in the sense that we don't even know
the variables. We don't know the variables to even quantify in this case.
Right.
Yeah. Because if the universe by definition is limitless, you can't possibly know what you're aiming for.
Do you know that they have AI now, like that can detect like cancer in the sense of if you breathe on them?
Yeah, I've seen stuff
like that's crazy. But that's so. I mean, obviously that's like a beneficial thing for humanity, but
it's fantastic.
Yeah. So you get that.
But it's a tool.
It's a tool, but you see how that builds, right? So then you'd have like.
But the building requires, like, we're literally at still Stone Age, cavemen with a hammer going, this, now we've got power.
Right.
Not realizing that we're still like on the same continent, never mind planet, never mind galaxy, sort of thing, right? Like it's.
So how does that, as a society, what do we need to do? Like, if we want to use AI as a tool, what are the things that we want to use it for? Like, what should be off limits, I guess, for AI?
What should be? I don't think I'm answering your question, but I think I'm going to say something that makes sense. Your spirituality. Like, I don't know why, because I think it becomes two separate roads sometimes. Are you going to take this path or this path, right? How about just a holistic you, your health, your body, your mind, your soul, whatever you want to call it, is like we like develop time. We put time into developing all these things that we know best of after a couple thousand years here of civilization. And simultaneously we continue with, modern technology. I don't know why it has to be such a duality, so like a paradoxical sort of thing. Like you must pick one path or the other path.
No, but I mean, if you wanted to have like AI, if it's a tool and there are certain things we know.
Just a tool, though. It's just a hammer.
Right. What would be some things that we wouldn't want to use the tool for? Like, for example,
for replacing your spirituality. I think sometimes it becomes a new religion unto itself.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like, this is everything.
Right.
We'll reach the singularity and have no more problems and transhumanism and all this stuff. And you've really kind of just derailed yourself from the other not easily quantifiable knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so that's a path, right? Like, and I think you need to try to embrace both paths.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, there's a lot of reverence for it. I'm not anti-science in the
least, but I'm really pro-spirituality too. And I don't think they have to, they're in such different veins. They may circle around to the same point, millions of years as we develop as a species, but we're nowhere near that yet. So I let one be one and the other one be the other one. And I enjoy them both for what they are. Yeah. But I don't let one replace the other. You have spiritual people like, I don't need any tech. I'm going to live on an island like Tom Hanks. Okay, but you're putting a lot of wear and tear on that body, and you might not live as long, right? Yeah. And I don't, if someone wants to live like that, that's fine. But I wouldn't promote that for myself, or my family. And simultaneously living in a $1 million, 400 square foot condo, detached from any interpersonal relationships and love for nature and getting to know yourself is also not particularly, I wouldn't call it fulfilling either.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the issue with AI is I'm sure you can, like you said, program this in. But as humans, we are tribal creatures,
right?
And so, we have the blue team versus the red team, the Shia versus the Sunni, the Protestant versus the Catholic. Like, we are so tribal in literally every aspect. The capacity to compromise has been the highlight of human evolution. And I don't know if that you're saying like tie that into AI at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Negotiating power, compromising your values. Can you compromise a value when you are a computer program?
That's the thing.
It's quite interesting, right?
But that's the thing, like, and obviously the programming is much more complex than this, but I always think of it in the terms of like, okay, so say you're programming something into, some AI software, and you're like, okay, for, if you want to have, maybe your like think of computer games where you're assigning a certain level of
attributes.
Attributes, and it's like +3, +4, or whatever. It's really just an outgrowth of that, isn't it? I mean, how else do you say, like, so if you're saying compromise,
those values that you're just putting in are already programmed. How do you know it's a +1 and not a +7? That person, that AI's lived experience, where do you draw that even? Like it's so, like you said, infinite number, like a George Bush, 1,000 points of light. Like it literally cascades into this like 3D spectrum of like numbers, like,
And isn't it, and it's kind of like algorithmic. Like even if you have an AI that's like learning, you're still, it's like, okay, now I'm not +7, I'm +8, or I'm, you know what I mean?
There's you literally have to have each AI be its own thing.
Yeah.
Like how that one particular robot, let's say, interprets its lived experience has to be different from another robot. Right. If they are overlappingly similar in too many ways, that being said, to counter my point a little bit there too, our belief in foundational values as humans supersedes our religious, political, and sexual identities. So we do as humans have core values too.
Right.
Like a certain, whether, it's your country you're born in or religion you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess you could program a baseline into that and then grow from there. But there still has to be room for so much individualism inside the robotic experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's yeah. It's a real interesting topic.
I don't know, like, pure reason, logic, values. These are the things that enrich people in a truly classical liberal sense. And I just don't know if you're going to get there with AI in any meaningful time for humanity, in time frame. Like it's just, I think it's a bit of is it the expression, a red herring? We're taking us down a certain path that's really not going to provide for us. It's kind of like transhumanism. Like, we're going to have radical life extension. Oh, wonderful. What does that mean? Well, instead of living to 120, AI will now let you live to be 130. The problem is getting to 120 to begin with, which comes back to core basic human, don't put too much stress on your body, eat great food, have a job, a work-life balance that is appropriate.
Yeah.
All these things are not technologically relevant.
Well, though I would say, in terms of life extension, you do get into a thing where, I mean, if you have technology that is able to detect cancers, like at the drop of a hat, and if you start eliminating these pathogens, or if you're able to kind of go in there and much more quickly identify,
it's a tool still.
Of course, there's a tool, but I'm just thinking, like, in terms of life extension, like I can see, there being everybody has their own little personal AI.
Yeah,
thing
at 55, instead of getting get prostate cancer, the AI picks it up and you make it
and it just keeps shooting them down.
Sure, of course. I'm not against medical science in any either medicine or science.
Oh, really? I thought you weren't vaccinated.
But the trade-off for every dollar spent to try to get you from 120 to 130 would be better off trying to get you from 60 to 120. Especially on a global perspective. Like, how dare we in the West try to increase our life expectancy through technology to 130 when there's people in Africa that don't have drinking water, right? Isn't that money better spent there?
Yeah, but it's not a money. Well, that's I don't know. I don't agree with that argument, because I just think it's because so what company? So go ahead and do it then. You know what I mean? Like, like you have, like, for example, like,
there's no money in helping the poor.
No, I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying it's like, you're at there are so much, like, it's why pharmaceutical companies are more interested in a drug for like Viagra or something than that, but other than something that is going to just completely cure some disease that.
But can we do it? Could we help more people with our money spent better?
Well, for sure. But you're talking about like a collective. Yeah, if we put all the money into one pot, it probably is a better idea to get everybody up to one standard than it is.
And then you work on it.
Yeah, but I mean,
And yes, of course, simultaneously you're doing research in this area because you don't want to start from scratch once you get, 200
but that
years
is
from
kind
now.
of what's happening. You know what I mean? Because you already have, like, for example, like agricultural projects that are like, there's more food available now. Like,
Yeah, I never believe this world is overpopulated or there's like a food shortage stuff. Drive from here to Windsor, there's nothing but cornfields. I think what we have is an import-export problem based on individual economies around the world and how they're
yeah,
particularly run and their buying capacity and what they can actually supply for their own people. And that's a man-made problem. We
yeah.
can fix that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, I mean, I think there are challenges to it because I do think, again, with climate change, like there's going to be different challenges in terms of where things grow. But I mean, you can grow a lot of this stuff in a lab, right? Like if you really wanted to. So it's kind of like the idea that we're going to all starve, I think is a little bit like far-fetched given what we can sort of accomplish now. And yeah, but I would say that this idea of kind of like that is a good idea as a sort of table topic idea, but it's like how would you implement that? Like,
Well, easier than implementing radical life extension.
well, so yeah, but like I mean, so Google already has I'm sure like projects that are dedicated to the poor or hungry or like how I'm sure they have projects that are dedicated to this, but they also have DeepMind,
Yeah,
right?
do both. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
but just the focus today, like it's such a low hanging fruit. It breaks my heart when you sit there and you're like, we're building Teslas, but do you see where the minerals come from? And you see these, and I know it's probably just a small screenshot of a window and they're happy to have any kind of job because before they had no job. Like I totally understand the growth curve they're going through, these countries. It just, something feels wrong about it. Like we're focused in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I
do you really think we live longer today? I mean, I know you can do like different like stats and like, but really like I think when you average out all the child deaths, like between 0 and 5 years of age, drop them out of the equation,
right,
and the deaths of women giving birth, because that happened to a significant number too.
Yeah.
And then you're left with like, and those are wonderful medical advancements. I'm not saying to take anything away from that. But if you were a man and you made it past the age of 10 and you were in a country of decent weather and food supply, you were pretty much going to 70, 80 years of age anyways.
Well, I think the idea though is
if
to
you're
get
in
that
muddy
number,
England with wars going on,
Yeah.
like that's, it's a different situation. But to say that technology has sort of swooped in and elevated us from 45 years of age, life expectancy to 85, I don't think it really, it's a lot more nuanced than that.
But what about like curing? Like there's a lot more you can do medically now.
Sure, but
like,
how many people do you know are still alive today because of a medical intervention?
I would
expect
a
small fraction.
Well, I mean, I just think of like, I mean,
let me put it in more simple terms because it's irrelevant today. How many years of life did the planet lose because of COVID? When the average person who was dying was 84 years of age. Like they had some life left, but not that much, right?
Right.
This wasn't one of those diseases, thank God, that didn't kill people at 10 years of age. Because then for each one you lose, they're losing another 70, 80 years of life per person.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's like diminishing returns as you get older. Like it's only so much life left anyways at that point. I think we really need to move the bottom up rather than the top even higher.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it is though is it's the same thing with like people talking about like, whoa, who cares if the climate changes 1 degree? Like, how can the 1 degree have much of an effect? It's like, yeah, but you're talking about like a large amount of people. So even the life expectancy, you can say like, oh, it only went up like, 10 points or whatever since like 200 years ago or something. It's like, okay, but those 10 points are huge. Like that's like you're talking about like all the people
big.
in the world.
I'm very happy for all the technological things we have in our world tremendously, but those 10 points would have been 70 points for somebody that's 10 years of age. So my focus is always on where am I going to get the maximum return? Getting that child not to die in between 0 and 5 of malaria, let's say, or some sort of disease.
Well, yeah,
vaccinations have been wonderful for polio and those sorts of smallpox.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying, or or at least I think that is important, but I do think there's separate things. Like I think it's you do need to, and I think that you were saying how it's a lot of it has to do with sort of administrative issues and where it's like almost depends on like governments or in certain countries that are like. They're just not well run. So it's hard to get like, for example, like vaccines like to a certain area of the population, like in the middle of Africa or whatever. So, I think those are a lot of problems that do need to be worked out.
It's going to be hard because like the interesting thing about and dangerous thing about AI, and going back to apologies, is like, I just think the centralization of any of that stuff will create a totalitarian society. So keeping it fragmented, for instance, like institutions, whatever we're talking about, medical science here, robotic science, artificial intelligence science, like if they all have the same ideology, then they get folded into the state. And that's the way we go Soviet. So having going back to apologies and living the individual life, whether it's life expectancy, as we were just talking about, between 10 and, it really comes down to like an individual sort of it's really individual. I think we've got to base the planet more on what's better for individuals rather than the collective whole. Because if we face on what's good for the individual, you'll get a stronger collective as a byproduct. Well, so it's fragmented to begin with.
Yeah.
That's the whole concept, is that we're going to treat it like a garden, and each plant needs a certain amount of water, not the same all the way through. And then collectively you have a wonderful garden. Of course, you have to curate the garden and make sure it turns out right, not just a wild, hot mess. There's got to be some rules, let's say. And so, bringing it back to like apologies, I think like as humans, depending on the culture we live in, there's certain like rules around it. But those rules have been radically changed in the last couple of years. And you get like the faux apology, where people's like, sorry, not sorry, because I don't want to be excommunicated from the world that we're building.
Yeah.
It becomes like a new religious movement, because like all these things become folded into one.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the worry, tying it back to AI, where the centralization of all this stuff, by definition, folds it into one.
What does that look like to you, though, where if you're saying like, let's not focus on the collective, like, so you're saying that like if we start, for example, with AI, it's like I don't know, I guess I don't understand that. Like so what are you saying in terms of like what would be an example of some things that we could do sort of as a society that would enrich us individually, as opposed to, like, are you sort of saying like we need to stay away from technology as people? So like, for example,
you can go back to something as simple as George Washington, where you had the right to own property, because they knew when you were then independent, you were more independent from the state as such, and you would have more free will and free voting power. You couldn't be so easily swayed from one side to the other, because you had independence.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And what do we hear today? Like, well, is it really? You see articles all the time. Is renting really not the right option for you? And really, because then you actually are beholden to the person who's got the contract on top of your head, as opposed to being completely, like, one of the things I loved about the 1960s, like, I think we saw something that for me feels, and I'm not a fan of like hippie culture and stuff, but it felt like the closest to what the golden age of Athens felt like, where you had strong, independent, well-educated, well-financed families who then the youth were like, screw this, this is BS what you're doing. I don't like your war in Vietnam. I don't like this. And they had the time, money, and opportunity to go and protest. Right. That would be horrific to the governing powers, right? Yeah. So anything that diminishes that sort of independence only allows the centralization structure, the nature, whether in Canada, we'll go back to the state broadcasters of certain countries and how they work together with corporations and how they work together with governments, create a single narrative. That really goes against like the individual's sovereignty. Your sovereignty is holy. Your individuality is holy. Yeah. And I think you need to start when you build a society based on that. So coming back to apologies, like I was wondering, we got to bring this back here.
We've talked about everything except
we're going. I'm trying to steer us to shore. It has to be heartfelt and come from you, the person, rather than because it's like, well, my church tells me I must say this because this is the ideology in which I subscribe to. Yeah. Even as an individual, I don't believe it. The mechanism in which I'm part of, my tribe, says I should say such things, so I'm saying them. Because the problem is today, I really don't like far-right people, but I really never saw them much in the last 20 years say, the person on the left needs to be deplatformed. Like, well, he's a jerk and I don't trust him and I don't believe in him and he's whatever. But they kind of left it at that. But we're living in an age today where the far left, if you say something that's outside of it, they want you excommunicated, deplatformed, right? And that's where it becomes fake, because now everyone's just running for the hills trying to cover their butts. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, promotes that behavior.
Yeah, so the apology thing, I think we've done an interesting conversation here where it really ties it back to the independence of the individual who's saying such a an apology. You know, it has to be heartfelt, sincere, and from their own mind.
Yeah, I see what you're saying because, like, yeah, you get a lot of like, well, the whole cancel culture thing. You get there are a lot of full apologies out there. I think it's really taken the meaning out of it. And I mean, you have to look no further than our own prime minister. I mean, how many times has he apologized for something? And so this is actually, I just wanted to kind of quickly ask about that. Like, so our prime minister in Canada, Justin Trudeau, you know, he's been sort of embroiled in a number of scandals, and he has apologized for them. And is there a certain point where that stuff just rings hollow? I mean,
I think for sure at this point in Canada, but the problem is that we're hypnotized. So that can supersede. It's like software being installed, like your own independent thoughts on him. You still feel bad to say something publicly against him because he represents the overwhelmingly good narrative.
Right.
So as an individual, you're like, I might despise the man, but he's part of the good narrative. It's like saying you hate the individual pope, but you're Catholic.
Right.
Well, at the end of the day, you're still going to like side with Team Catholic because that's the tribe you belong to.
I guess, yeah. Because a lot of people have. I mean, it's amazing to me how many people have sort of almost become apologists for Trudeau, or like, you know, when he's in sort of in a scandal. And I try to look at it objectively, like. When I see, for example, with the residential schools where he was tearful and giving the apology, my instinct is like, that's disingenuous. Those are crocodile tears.
Was it coming from him or from the ideology he represents? Like, my ideology demands sacrifice, and therefore I'm crying for this moment. But does Justin Trudeau, the person, really feel that way?
Well, no. See, that's the thing. This is what I didn't understand about it. Where it's like, okay, I understand. Like, I think, you know, I want to try to be objective about this. So, like, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and be like, okay, it's a very sad thing. So maybe he's been talking to people who have suffered from this. They've had their, you know, and he's hearing these stories firsthand, maybe. So he's really affected by it, like in theory.
He's human.
So, yeah. So I
think.
Yeah. When he's doing this, when he's making the apology, maybe it's all genuine. But then I think, like, you know, it's hard to think because, like you said, is it an individual or an ideology? Like, he's apologizing on behalf of a country.
Based on his individual behavior, though, as we've known him now somewhat publicly in the last 6-7 years, I think a lot of people could say the person is not a very good person.
Yeah, and
therefore
fairly
the tears.
disingenuous.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So you have to now start thinking, like, maybe not giving him the benefit.
But can you break
doubt.
away from that hypnotism?
Well, I don't know what you. I mean, I guess you mean like people. Like I don't feel as though you know. I think there's a lot of people that aren't necessarily hypnotized by him.
We'll see in the next election.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of people are, unfortunately. But
this is where I actually am really turned off of all state media because television. You know, like, it's such a despite all the social media that we have these days, the average person still really sits down in front of the TV and just turns on the state news. If not, they have quality apps and they read this stuff there. And in Canada, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I would give the CBC credit in that it gives the most like thought out arguments for its points, whereas the other companies like Global News and City TV kind of just give you the headlines and a rough little splattering of what's happening. There's nothing really deep. Right? We don't have a private company that actually goes really deep into the stories the way we should. You've got to turn to, you know, Substack and different quality doctors that you follow around the world and read tons and tons of articles to get there, or podcasts, right?
Yeah.
So the average person is still beholden to the state media, which, you know, it's a very hypnotizing factor. It keeps you in Plato's cave.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I guess we'll see in the next election, and maybe it's just the silo that I sort of, you know, live in, and the news I listen to is not, you know, it's quite negative against Trudeau. So I don't feel any, I feel like, okay, like, you know, this guy's. I mean, it's every election. It's amazing to me that he wins.
Did you see the Supreme Court that came out this week? Did we talk about that at all? There was a court case. This is a little derailing, but just take a minute. 2 Canadian but British background, I believe they were restaurant entrepreneurs, took the government to court, and this will tie into state media. And they unsealed the documents, and the question was, federal government, what data did you base the Arrive can, which in Canada is the only way to enter the country is with this digital app, whether you're a foreign national or Canadian national. Okay. What did you base this on in order to have this digital gatekeeper because of vaccines and COVID? And when they unseal the documents, the data that came out, the government's reasoning.
Just a doodle.
Little snowman there waving with a beaver tail. Yeah, no, it was absolutely nothing. Okay, so never mind that fact. That even somewhat can be debated. I've scoured the regular news mediums here in Toronto. There's nothing about it. The Toronto Sun had a smart article, the National Post had, but the CBC, the state broadcaster, not a word. Does it get more Plato's cave than that when you actually have government? Why did it take 2 restaurateurs in order to open this document? Take the government to court. And where's the investigative journalism that's supposed to be coming from the publicly funded? You have to the tune of 1.2 billion or so of our tax dollars, and they couldn't ask such a question.
Yeah.
So much for doing your own research. It literally took 2 restaurant guys to figure this out.
Yeah, and the fact that this story is being run on international media, but not in really major Canadian
Absolutely,
media.
yes.
Although National Post and Toronto Sun are at least big outlets, like you do get that side.
People get tribal. I talk to the regular Canadians on the hour every hour, the nature of my job. And, if I do reference something from any of those 2, that's that. And they just pick their tribe. I'm like, can you just look at the data and read it? I have no tribe. Right. I am completely tribeless, It's kind of cool to be in that position. I don't know how I ended up here, or that's a whole other podcast, but I am. And it is like, just give me the data, man.
Yeah.
And they don't want to see it. So they really just want to be directed back to Plato's cave, and that's hypnotism.
Yeah.
Like, give me what the CBC says, because I've trusted it my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yep.
And it's really disempowering to the individual's intellect, because what they're doing is they're deferring their own personal intellect to a higher AI, which in this case is the algorithm which dictates the ideology of the CBC. It becomes like its own, its own thing. Well, I don't know. Everyone in Canada trusts that. And they just turn their head back to that for fear that they actually have to use their own thoughts and maybe get called out a little bit. We've really lost that sort of renegade frontier. I'm just going to stand up and tell you what I think. I mean, isn't that the point of democracy? That my voice matters?
Yeah.
A little too bombastic there. A little too heavy on the. I'm very passionate about this. I really think it's the better way forward for humanity. The better way forward for humanity is not collectivist; it's individualism.
Yeah.
And through individualism, we'll have a strong collective.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's 2 opposing philosophies, and I would side.
And there has to be that point where the individualism does become collective. If not, you have the balkanization, and we'll just fragment and go into civil war. Yeah. And you don't want to turn into that. I mean, you already have states versus states and provinces versus provinces, and that's bad enough as it is. It's really hit insane levels. In academia now, they have how to build better architecture with queer theory. That's where we've hit now. That's how niche-y in some ways, because it's it fits the overarching narrative.
Yeah.
It's just an orgiastic departure from reason. It's as if with the last 500 years of enlightenment were just for nothing, and we're desperate to return to the Dark Ages. We're desperate to return to feudalism. Yeah. Yeah,
it's interesting if you can sort of separate yourself from the era that you're living in, and you can kind of look at it and be like, it's whoa, what's going on here?
I can understand how humans moved in different packs at different phases of of humanity now.
Right.
Because there is a certain temptation. I can feel it, but you have to resist it. Because we've lived long enough as a species, we've seen what works and doesn't work.
Well, just like you had sort of the Renaissance and other eras where, the Dark Ages, you can kind of see how, because I always used to think, well, the Renaissance. So they label that sort of post the era. They weren't in the Renaissance being this is a Renaissance.
Yeah.
At least I don't think they were. But they, but if you look back at it, you can say,
I'm in the middle of the Renaissance.
Yeah, nice.
Amazing.
But I feel like we're in the middle of some era that in the future they'll look back and be like, this was the whatever, Plato's cave era or something, or just something there were a lot of positive things about where we are right now as a society.
Digital prison.
But but there's a lot of, we're on the precipice of a lot of
psychological nudging of humanity and mass cohesion sort of ways. You can see it. You can see it. And it's difficult. And that's why it's great to have these conversations, because we're just, like walking in the dark with our hands out, trying to feel our way through this. You know, it's quite challenging. But, you know, our societies, the wonderful thing is our societies have never been freer or more functioning than they are now. And to be quite frank, than anywhere else in the world. We have a lot to be, here's the killer word, proud about. You know, they forbid that if you're forbidden to be proud of the society that we live in, where the marching feet of the world's poor are coming because it's so free. And through freedom, they find economic, upward mobility.
Yeah.
You know, if you just want economic upward mobility, go to China.
Right.
You know, they've done a wonderful job taking people out of poverty, but still, is that the place you're going to live your most fulfilled? You got one chance at life. It's got to be more than just like how many digits are on my computer screen.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Just like, but about those apologies, like,
man. Well, because I think the apology, that what we're tying in here, and it's really, it's almost like the target on the wall is the apology, but it really comes down to being sincere, heartfelt, and individually based. And that's really a byproduct of society right now.
Yeah.
We're not living in an era where like your individual opinion really matters anymore, because it's like, well, subjectively, this is how I lived my life.
Right.
And this is how I feel, you know, sort of thing. And so the tribe and the ideology says, therefore, you must, instead of, well, actually, I do believe in chromosomes and there is an XXXY. And by God, if you identify as something, I'm your friend and I will support you to the end. But I don't feel a need to participate in that game myself. Can I not just not have a pronoun? Or how about I allow you to guess because I prefer it that way? Right.
Is there, do you think that people apologize more or less these days? Or is it probably roughly the same? It's not the kind of thing you can really do a study on.
Whatever it is, it's less heartfelt and more digital.
Yeah, technology has affected the apology.
You're not face to face with the person the way you used to be.
And I do think part of the tribalism that was mentioned is like that affects it. Like I think a lot of people, and maybe this isn't true, but I feel like a lot of people are more defensive or aren't so willing to yield an apology for no reason, or it's very skeptical about, like, if I go for a run and somebody so the other day I was doing this, actually is where I thought of this, like it was like, let's do an episode on apologies, where it was like, I went for a run and on the path, somebody was on a bike and it was like running path. Like this was also a bike path. So it's like they came around a corner real sharp and I was running and it almost hit me. And I was like, usually my instinct in those things is like you're like just to yell and be like, you're in the wrong path. Like, what the hell are you doing?
It's a shared path.
Yeah. But this actually isn't a shared path. They should have been they have their own path. So, but every once in a while they'll, bikes will come down because they want to go to the river, which is like, right, you have to kind of cross it to get there. So I thought, okay, you never know. But I thought, it bothers me when you confront somebody about this and the reaction is not like you're objectively in the wrong here. Like these are the rules of this little system, and you're going against the rules. Now, if you just want to be an asshole and just be like, I'm just going to do it anyway, then that's one thing. But if you can't justify that you're in the wrong here. Like you almost hit me. I came around a corner. Like it's because you're on a bike and you shouldn't be on a bike on this path. And like, there's no. Like I would hope that in that situation, somebody's like, immediately just be like, you know what, you're right, I'm wrong, I am sorry. Like that's an apology. You know what I mean? Yeah. You have to recognize that you made a mistake.
It's rare when people are like, oh my God, that you're right. And it's a beautiful thing when someone, because there is heat in the moment and your hormones are raging and a person can still have clarity to say, whoa, okay, I was in the wrong.
Yeah.
It's a rare thing.
Have you ever noticed how if somebody does apologize, it's like it immediately opens up and then the other person will be like, yeah, it's okay. Like, blah, blah, blah. Like it's just such a healing thing.
Well, because we all make mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, you want the person to know, I mean, I guess it depends on the nature of how, if somebody like runs over your dog, it's not like sorry. Like you want to have like almost an equivalence in apology. Like you want that to be.
You don't want me to pull over on a podium and just have like crocodile tears and go, as Canadians, we all know dogs matter, and I will do my best to endeavor. Right. Yeah, that's how apologies feel these days. Like very scripted.
Very scripted.
As opposed to just like, man, I didn't see you. Oh Jesus, what did I do?
Well, I will say, like,
it's mistakes. We're all human.
In defense of
we're not AI.
The kind of like the whole. apologizing on behalf of a country or whatever, it kind of has to be scripted. Like, how are you're doing something for the record. This is why the tears ring a bit disingenuous to me. And again, I don't know, maybe they were, like, I don't want to be just always negative about it, but it's like, because I'm thinking, like, how can you feel that much empathy? Like, you didn't do this, you know what I mean?
I almost feel
like,
sometimes these politicians must have been through acting school, as ours was. But
yeah, well,
but in general, globally, because this tier on demand thing, it just really never feels authentic.
Yeah.
And I like to cry. I have no issue. I'm very emotional that way. But I could never imagine pulling tears out of my eyes on demand. It's so naturally just like it's a base emotion that you can't fake. So to be able to be an actor and do that, I have to give them full credit because I don't know how they possibly do it. But it feels to actor level fake from almost all politicians all the time.
Yeah, but
and corporations and whatever else is going on.
Like, it's a tricky situation when you're apologizing on behalf of a nation or on behalf of, some, like, the church or whatever, like, because you didn't do anything. You're just, it's a, you know what I mean? You're just,
well, then you don't need to have tears though.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying.
Tears,
so it's like,
or if the tears come, let them be natural.
You're recognizing, it's kind of like it's for the record. It's like, look, what we did, for example, with the residential schools and by, what we did as a country was unforgivable. So like you say that and it gets recorded for the record, and that's, important to do it. Now, the kind of the injecting of tears into that is like, that's fine. Like, I don't know, maybe that is something that really moved him. But I to your point of it being, where you're saying it seems like a drama or whatever, it's like, I kind of can see that, because for me, I'm thinking, like, if I was apologizing on behalf of something, my ancestors did or whatever, I wouldn't feel any kind of empathy for it, because it's like, I didn't do it.
But
like, I might feel bad for the situation.
In the context of history. Like, you're like, man, okay, that was then, this is now, however,
Yeah, there's a real art to it. Like, it's not that it's not, like, I mean, that's what it means to be a great statesman, right? There's an art to that kind of thing. But yeah, it's, has there ever been anything that you've been sort of really sorry for and have...
If I say no, I sound like a psychopath. So I'm digging deep here now. But I'm happy to say it's not that many times in life.
Yeah.
Like there's but you look back with the benefit of age, and you can say, oh yeah, man, at 2021, I was kind of toxic sort of thing. I was too much of this or too passionate maybe.
Yeah.
But it was, and my passions took me down maybe rabbit holes that were, created barriers that I was certain in was the better way to be, live, whatever. And it was in the final analysis, maybe too isolationist. That's all. But that's just, you're 19 years old and a kid, See, that whole equivocation after the fact though isn't, you know what I mean? Like, it's not really regretful. Like, for example, like I would say, well, I regret it now, and I wish if I had a child at that age, I can definitely think of like advice I would give based on that sort of nature that I didn't get myself, and that would be my way of like helping like each generation be a little bit better than the previous. But what can you do about it? I don't know. It happened. You're a youth,
right?
Like sometimes you're in a relationship and you break up and you're the bad guy. Sometimes you're in a relationship, you get dumped. Like life just kind of oscillates back and forth. Were you particularly bad in one situation in one way or the other? Not really. It just happened.
But so what you're doing, so this is that's not an apology, right? So like, and it's fine if you don't have an apology. Like if you
none of these are. You're right.
Be born out of regret and be regretful for something, and then you apologize for it, and it has to, like, so I have a couple of examples that I've done, specific things I've done in the past that I've been like genuinely sorry for, and I've tried to address it in a way where it's like it's like the whole Alcoholics Anonymous thing, where it's like, isn't one of the when you're doing the 10 steps where it's, or 12 steps, I don't know if it's 12 or 10. I forget.
Never got past 4 anyways.
But there's a step where you go around to apologize to everybody that you've harmed sort of in the past by your behavior. So, and I think that's a good, I think that's a good idea to because there has to be this recognition of the fact that you've done something wrong and that you're willing to reflect. Like, it's this whole reflection.
And learn from it. And that's the whole point of life, that you end up, as we get older, in a better place than we were when we started.
Right.
But that's also part of it. Yeah, of course. There's been moments in my life like that. I'd have to sit down and think about them individually more. But they're not more than 10 big ones probably.
So I'll tell you one of these for me.
Is this a confessional time?
Well, I think it's important to I'm just trying to sort of put my money where my mouth is, right?
Maybe some will pop into my mind too, and I can reciprocate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's like I'm not ashamed of it now. I mean, I'm sort of ashamed of my behavior then, but I feel like the fact that I can I really do feel like I learn from it, and I can sort of show. Like I guess I can't show it, but I know my own behavior since then and how I've changed. And so I can kind of be like, okay, I made these mistakes. I apologize for it and I'm moving on. It's like, what's that? It's like that guy, I forget his name, but he's from Toronto, and he was coming back from a bachelor party and he was drinking and driving. He ended up killing a whole family.
Oh, wow.
Do you remember that guy?
Yeah, there's been a couple stories lately. Was that the one that was like from a wealthy family?
Wealthy family, yeah. I forget his name. But at the time I was pretty angry, like as anyone would be, because you see this family, it's just been like death, and I think the remaining members, one of them maybe even killed themselves or something because of the grief, and it's like you can never repair that, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter how many times you apologize, and but it's like, and not even in defense or whatever, but it's a little bit, it's like, you make one mistake, you know what I mean? Or, you know what I mean? I'm sure he's made several mistakes, but it's like that's a real tough situation. Like, he
split minute
and what do you do?
Yeah,
it's like eight. So he had more drinks than he should have for sure. It's like mass negligence on his part. But for the rest of his life, he's going to be paying for that, right? So it's like, I'm not saying for sure. Like he'll just never be able to repay it is the problem. It doesn't mean necessarily he's a horrible person, but kind of like. I guess my point is that now this whole thing came up, I think earlier this year.
Great responsibility, and that's why you can only drive after a certain age and drink after a certain age.
Yeah, but once it's happened, it's kind of like you have a situation where it's come up recently because he was somebody in the family died or killed themselves or something. And I could be wrong about that. I know they died. And it's just kind of brought the whole thing up again. So it's kind of like, so anytime something like that happens, this is again something for his, his life will be forever changed for this, and forever will feel guilty for this, and it's horrible, and he should feel guilty for the rest of his life. But it's like, at what? I guess my point is that is a serious situation, and I don't know if apologies can ever fix that. But this guy is not necessarily he's not a monster, right? He didn't deliberately do this. It doesn't mean that he shouldn't pay. It doesn't mean he shouldn't go to jail or whatever. But
it wasn't I get your point. It wasn't a premeditated murder.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a really dumb accidental murder.
Yeah, and the effect is the same. 100%. People are still dead because of it.
Your moral dilemma is that it's in the category of accidental.
Yeah, and I guess or
negligent,
yeah, and I've done things where it has never been to that level, but I can certainly say it's not that I haven't drank and drove before. I've done that too, right? I like to think that I was in a better frame of mind or whatever, and I wouldn't have done that, but who knows, right? You never know. You're in the wrong place in the wrong time. You drop, it's such a split second thing. So it's
for sure. And it also goes a little bit cultural. It was in our generation where it became more they are testing with you. What was it? The alcohol limits and how much. It was a new emerging sort of thing. The breathalyzers and whatnot. How many drinks can you actually have? And you can easily make a mistake when it's a new emerging standard. Right.
Well, yeah, and I never really put much. I just sort of knew my own levels, but it's I realize that that's something where, I'm not saying that I always made sure I stayed under that level, but I knew when it was too much.
It was a gradient. I remember, being around that time too and trying to figure out okay, so I had one drink 6 hours ago and another one. What am I at? I feel pretty good. Right. I can walk in a straight line. I don't have a metric to measure me absolutely.
Right.
And it can be a gray area for sure. So better not to even go near that line.
Yeah.
But good luck telling a 19-year-old that.
True. Yeah. But, and you hope that, for example, with this guy, you hope that sort of serves as a lesson to, at the very least, what you can kind of get out of that is other people might look at that and think twice, for sure. For me, there was a time when, this is obviously less dramatic, but just online, I got into this like sort of battle with somebody about a situation. This was years ago. I was talking about the war in Yugoslavia. And I just didn't know much about it. And I kind of heard a few things and I was like, okay, so I made some comment about, well, I forget what it was. I think it was like defending Serbia or something, but I really not knowing about the situation that much other than what I kind of heard on a few things. Is it
embarrassing how little we knew back then?
Yes,
like
it is.
In comparison now, I know so much about COVID and I've just gone crazy and I found great ways to do like university level research while sitting at my desk at home sort of thing. And I look at all the past events in history, whether it's September 11th or Yugoslavia, like I wish I could have been there at the time and have these mechanisms to do a deep dive before I open my mouth.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's, you really have to, but it
goes back to state media. You're just watching the one-sided version that's coming through the news and you're going to quickly in 5 minutes develop usually the narrative they're trying to tell you is the right one to have.
This was a situation where I was taking the other end. Like I've always sort of been anti, whatever authority or whatever. So like I was like, well, because it was the Serbians were sort of the bad guys, and I was like, well, like this isn't so bad. And then I was doing this on a forum, and I got back and forth, and he's like, look, like somebody chimed in, he's like, look, I am, what was it? I'm, was it? I can't remember the. Like he was from the area, and he's like I suffer. I've had people killed. I'm watching this happen. Like who are you to tell me that this is? And he was right. Like, and it was like I didn't have any kind of like. It's not like I read specific reports or like it did any deep investigation. And I felt like a real moron because I was like he's absolutely right. And I sort of thought about that, and like it really bothered me because I hate coming off as like uninformed and I apologize. I said like, what, wonderful. You're right. And I'm not trying to say like, see, I do it right or whatever, but it's like, I think that to me, that's what an apology, like it's important to reflect on what you've done and actually feel regret. These kind of apologies where it's like, you don't even like this, the general kind of like, oh, I'm sorry I'm sorry, whatever I did, I'm sorry. Like that whole thing, it's like, well, you're not sorry then. You know what I mean? Like you don't really, like you have to be specific. You need to like.
And I think the greater, and this is maybe, I just try to always make sure I put it into action. So I just live my life. It's like a refining process, better and better and better based on the lived experiences, which includes regrets each day.
Yeah.
Right? Because an apology is great and definitely makes a person feel better and it should be done. But the more important thing is to then live that apology for the rest of your life.
Yeah, to definitely learn from it. Yeah. So I'll say another one here, and this is going to make me look like a real asshole, but it was such even now I'm like I think back and it's just like cringe inducing how. But I part of this is like maybe I'll say it on here and maybe this person will hear it, you know what I mean? Or maybe people, or I deserve to be able to have my sort of penitence and say this and be like, held to account. I don't know, like if he ever came back. But anyway, so one time I had this new car and it was like my mom's car or something. It wasn't mine, but I was like fairly young. I was like, 19 or 18 and it just happened to guzzle gas really quickly and I wasn't used to it. And I ran out of gas on the middle of the highway. I was like, oh my God. And this guy like pulled over. He's like, look, I'm going to give you $20. I'm going to drive you to the gas station, give you $20 to fill it out because I didn't have any money on me. I was just an idiot. Yeah. And
there's less ATMs than back in the day.
Yeah. So he gave this to me, took me to the gas station, drove me back so I could put gas in my car and then drive to the gas station, put the $20 in or whatever. And he's like, but I want you to make sure that you send this back to me. And I'm like, yeah, I'll send it back to you, whatever. And I never sent it back.
How did he want you to send it back? This is before
just like send him a check or something. Okay. Yeah. And I just never did it. And like I forget how I justified it to myself at the time. It was like, I don't know if it was like, oh, sucker or whatever, just horrible. Like I think back and I still remember it. It still gives me pangs of
imagine that. So just $20, how much because it was the action. You promised and you let someone down.
I know.
And you meant it at that time. Like and I can tell. I can see it in your eyes. Like you actually like, no, man, I'm telling you, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And then you didn't.
I know.
It could be for $1 or $1,000.
Decades later, it drives me crazy. And I'll never, because I don't know who this guy is.
So what have you learned from this?
like never promise
Take a bank
something.
card.
Yeah. Well, I'll just take my wallet with me.
The deal with that guy in the future. Yeah, no, yeah.
No, just I mean, it was really humbling, like thinking of this afterwards. And there's no. I mean, this. Fortunately, the effects of this aren't of the magnitude, the mistake that the guy made with the accident where he killed a bunch of people. But it's like, it's the same sort of. Like it is a mistake that I'm really sorry that I made. I wish I could go back, but I can't go back. It's, you know, if I ever, like, I wouldn't even recognize the guy. So it's like, but
do you think to this day, like based on the essence you picked up from that person then, do you think he's just sitting there going, that's okay, man, $20, whatever. I helped someone out the night and he feels good about it.
I think that I think what bothers me more than anything is I feel like I made his view of humanity a little less. He's like, this guy looked me in the eyes and said, actually, I don't know if I looked him in the eyes, but it's like, whatever the case, there we go, equivocating again. But it's like, you know, this guy said he was going to do it. He didn't do it. I went out of my way to be helpful to this guy, and he let me down.
I've been in that guy's position before, where I remember back in high school, someone said, "Can I just borrow $5, man?" And you know, when you're 15 years old, $5 was lunch at McDonald's, you know, sort of thing. Like, I'll pay. I promise I'll pay you back like tomorrow, the next day. I just got to go home and ask my parents for $5. And I'm like, okay, sure. And I gave the $5, and that person avoided me for the next 3 years.
Right.
But from my position, I'm like, we were just kids. That person probably regrets it, doesn't need to. You know, we all make mistakes. It was a relatively minor mistake. You know, I guess you can put it in tiers.
I mean,
you know, how many Hail Marys do you need to do for that one?
Well, that's the benefit of being Catholic, I guess. You can always just
put a number on it.
Put a number on it. Like I think that's sort of you putting your positive spin on it. I appreciate that, but it's like there's really I think it probably affected him in some way. I'm sure he's forgotten about it now, but it's like
he knew you were a child. I think you're giving yourself, in this particular case, a lot more adult credibility or credentials. You know, you were still a kid.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah,
he would hope though that you've learned since then.
Right.
I think that's the same thing with the girl that owes me the $5. If she ever hears this, you know, that they pass that gratuity on to someone else in their life.
Right.
And just kind of like let it happen. Like, it's okay. Nothing has to be perfect. There's no perfect order in the universe. You know, a little bit of chaos is all right. That's part of the organic living experience.
Yeah.
You just don't want it to be catastrophic, like the car accident that knocked out the whole family.
Yeah.
You know, that's just something you can't, even though it's in the category of negligence and an accident, it's you can't recover from it. The $10, $20, the $5 you can recover from.
Yeah. It's something we hope as a society we kind of like, you know, maybe one day I'll be in that position to do that and I won't be repaid. And it'll be like, okay, now the universe is balanced again, you know. Like,
who knows, maybe today they'll say, well, you know, in a position of hierarchical power, you are the powerless, therefore you're not obliged to pay back.
Right. Yeah. I'm the victim.
You're the victim, James. You can only see the way postmodernism will attack this problem. Well, you know, this is the thing, like, if diversity, and by diversity, I don't mean diversity of skin color, religion, or anything like that, but like diversity of fundamental values. Mm-hmm. If diversity of fundamental values is what we're aiming for, at the end, you know what I've thought long about this. You know what that is? Decomposition. There's nothing to unify us, right? What you're looking for now, and we're talking about, is shared unified values. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. I would have been better served if I did. That's, you know, you're looking for a certain fundamental landscape here to judge your actions by. And I commend you for that, and I think society needs to stay on that sort of. That's what keeps a society unified. Too much diversity is just decomposition, and you're not going to have any unity anymore.
Right? Yeah.
That's why we have, you know, laws and whatnot. But then even they, you know, like I said, they're open to interpretation.
Yeah. That's why
based on new structures of power and hierarchy, which are like just really kind of, I don't want to say frivolous, but not unproven, perhaps. Mm-hmm. You know. Yeah,
that's why this organic change needs to happen slowly, and this is why we have like these first principles that are supposed to sort of like govern our society. Mm-hmm. And that are all things that we all are supposed to sort of agree on, that is like wrong or, you know, immoral or whatever.
You know, like this is not really in the same vein, but you know, that sort of that flow back and forth and excommunicating people based on their values. Like, I've never seen anyone on the right call somebody on the left, like I was telling you earlier, to be deplatformed, right? So like, for instance, if you, Fox doesn't care, and I can't stand any of the American or our own Canadian news broadcasters, but Fox doesn't care if you've been on CNN and then go on Fox. Like, sure, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Just, well, let's talk about it. I'll totally disagree with you, but whatever.
Yeah.
But CNN cares if you've been on Fox.
Right.
Because at that point, you're tainted. You've been stained with this sort of like immorality.
Yeah.
To how dare you have gone to the other side. Right?
There's definitely, I definitely see that as well, where it, you know, and I think it's like the reaction would be like, well, of course you would say that because you're tending more right or whatever. But it's like, no, I
truly am not.
Yeah, this is true. This is something that I really did, you know, you really do see. You don't see people on the right, at least not as much. I'm sure it happens. I don't, you just really don't see it as much. You do see a lot of people on the left calling for somebody to get canceled. You don't see that on the right. Like, you don't see people for the most part saying like, I mean, they could say like, you know, like, I mean, it must happen, but it really doesn't come up as much.
Yeah, you know,
I can't think of
the left-right thing is becoming so tired too. Like I just was thinking, but like I just believe in classical values.
Yeah,
you know, like, why does it have to be a left-right thing? Like, they really are. These are our foundational values, and I don't really care for the nuance of splitting hairs. What's percentage tax points, this or that, or, you know, like, it doesn't matter so much to me if we don't have foundational values.
Yeah,
you know, so
yeah,
for me, then the apologies stem from that, right?
Right. Yeah, the right left used to be talking about economic policy, or maybe whether you're more hawkish or dovish when it comes to like foreign affairs. But now it seems to be you know, the rights are Nazis, the lefts are communists. You know what I mean? It's like, well, wait a minute, can't we all agree, just as like Canadians or as Americans, that like we all certainly agree on like free speech, right? Or like, you know what I mean? But not so much anymore.
Did you not see the someone high up at Twitter when Elon Musk was trying to take over about 2 years ago, and he got caught in an interview? Oh yeah, he's like, here at Twitter, we're communist as F. You know?
Oh really?
Yeah. Like, you just flat out said it, caught on video. Like, really? And you feel confident enough to say such a thing? You know?
Yeah.
Like, where did the foundational values go when you can make such a proclamation?
Right.
We're not standing on the same level anymore.
Yeah.
The same what would you call it? Not so much level, but the historical Western values platform. You know, where we can at least see the diversity, but we have some unity in how we approach the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, apologies play out, I think, in that thing. Like, to what degree do you feel like the George Floyd horrific, you know, act, but that was a worldwide event?
Yeah, it really, I think it was the
whole world very much apologized.
Yeah, it was a very, I don't know what it was. Maybe it had something to do with COVID, or maybe it was just the fact that it was caught on tape and it was fairly graphic, like that catalyzed that whole movement.
Like the catharsis of people, you know, it's just...
Yeah, it was like, I think a lot of that stuff is timing, right? Like, because we've seen that kind of thing before. Remember Rodney King? Like, Rodney King was like, there was no mistaking what was going on there, right? Like... and I guess it did spur a bunch of riots. It's not like that was
not global, but it was a different age.
Yeah, different age. Yeah,
now we had the chanting, the kneeling, the hands in the air.
Yeah,
like, how is that not religious?
Yeah, it's
we've just created new ideologies that fill in the atheist hole that we've kind of created now with a new religion. It's like the religious tendencies in people just doesn't go away. It just comes back in a new form.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think that these are. There's a religious aspect to a lot of these movements these days, and I think that does come from a lack of religion. And I mean, it served a purpose, right? Like, you can say whatever you want about organized religion. Like, I'm not a huge fan of it either, but it did fill a need in people.
And I'm aware that I have a religion, and I'm aware of its pros and its cons. But I don't know if these people even realize they're basically partaking in a religion and have thought about the pros and cons. You know, I don't need another religion. I have one, and it has its own issues.
Right.
You know, and I'm totally fine with that. You know.
Yeah, they're full on, like, you know, Spanish Inquisition. Like, they're still at that phase. You know.
So then, going back to apologies, like, to what degree do they're stemming out of these new religions of a sort that people don't even necessarily have thought long and hard on an individual basis. It's just the way things are like developing, and they just, I definitely have to say, you know, like you see the classic Facebook and everyone puts the new current thing badge up, right? Like, it's basically a form of an apology.
Yeah.
Right? Did they really mean it? Have they actually interacted with the person in a better manner than before because of what they've seen? You know, like that's really what it should come down to. I don't know. I'm just very bread and butter and like feet on the street, like just be a better person daily.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to like people that show up at church and sit in the front row because they want to show people that they're more virtuous. It's horrible.
Well, I mean, some people might just want the...
Yeah,
I mean,
for the right reasons. For the right reasons. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing playing out over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting when you think of... I think it's really important that people have the characteristic of self-reflection. Like, I think it's really important to be able to step back, maybe take 10 minutes at the end of the day and be like, let's go over the day and how I behaved. Because like when you think of, I just have this image in my mind of somebody waking up, just being like, getting on with their day, just retweeting a bunch of stuff on Twitter and just being like participating in these angry mobs, issuing fake apologies, or like just doing everything and without any kind of self-analysis, whether it's like at some point when you have to be like, wait a minute, did I like, I'm a human being, right? Like don't I genuinely want to feel some of these things, and don't I genuinely want to like think for myself? And you know, it's
no, they don't.
But it's amazing because it's like, what do you just cry yourself to sleep at night? Like because I would think that people like this, there's still
like alcohol. They just it's their version of like, I'm just going to diffuse the pain.
Maybe, and you just don't think about it until you have some crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you got me thinking, should I have apologized for more stuff in my life? I'm like staring at the clouds in the sky, going, I think beautiful summer day here in Canada.
This is the thing that I've noticed with people.
I feel guilty that I can't come up with some like big ones.
Well, to be fair, I thought this over the past week or whatever, so I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Because
nobody's perfect. There's certainly things, but none of them, mine seem like I would put them in the category of trivial and growth curves.
Right.
You know, if I were just to quickly suss out something, you know?
Well, I think that one thing I noticed, like with people these days, and I don't know if this has always been the case, but people never think that they're the ones that people are talking about. So like if you're talking about, like right now we're talking about people who don't say they're sorry. And, you know, I think most people listening to this would be like, I don't know, like, you know, our listeners probably have a greater self-reflection than most, but like, I think that oftentimes I'll be in a conversation with people, and like I've had people talk to me about how crappy cancel culture is. Mm-hmm. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, but you do it. Like I've seen you do it. You know what I mean? And you're just not making the connection here.
I've never seen more self-projectionism than the last like 5-10 years. And you can really see it online. Like you see the sentence structure there and they're like, okay, wait a sec. This is not just like words that are flying by quickly. I can analyze your sentence and you're completely just projecting your own fears or tribalism on me, you know, like, and they're not understanding the context from where I'm actually, like, hey, we're friends. We can figure this out, you know?
But I do think that there's a lot of people, and I often am querying myself to see if I do this because I'm conscious of it. But like people never think they're on the bad side. People will always think when you're talking to people about like, you know, COVID or whatever, I'm sure you get a lot of your clients are like there's a lot of, there's this self-defense. There's this self-defense mechanism or whatever. It's like, well, I'm not like, it's like, yeah, I know all these ill-informed people, right? And it's like, yeah, but you're kind of, in many ways.
I try to, in terms of that, and it's an interesting thing, like, work is work and, COVID is COVID. And I try not to mix the two unless a person I know really well and we have a sort of like type of relationship and whatnot. But I'll tell you one thing that it's not so much an apology, but a trait that I didn't have when I first moved to Greece. So I was very Canadian and I was very, apologetic, sorry, wait in the queue. Right. That sort of norms that we grew up with. And I realized, and it didn't happen quickly, but it took about 2, 3, 4 years, that like, if you behave like that there, you're going to get eaten alive. So then you have to develop a sort of like a cynical, they said yes, but it probably means at best maybe. And there's no mechanism here to really think for me. I'm on my own in a foreign country with nobody around. Go. It's all individual. It's all you. And you're going to be hoping for the best. You always take a positive approach to the world, but completely expecting and preparing for the worst. And that can be whether it's getting paperwork done for the business we're opening, dealing with franchise managers, dealing with staffings, dealing with strikes. The country was going bankrupt when we were there, so we had riot police and tear gas and everything going on. And you just realize, like, if I wait for the system to do what I need to do, I'll be dead. So I have to start to pick up the pace. And that makes you really kind of more edgier, right?
Yeah.
So then fast forward, we're back in Canada now for about the same length of time as I was away, about 10 years. And I haven't quite let go of some of those more jumpy attributes. And they don't always serve me best in Canada. Because for the most part, things in Canada are the way they seem. Public health tells you to do something, you're generally going to be okay. Here, the Canada, the IRS, the CRA asks you to pay something, you're generally happy where the taxes go and know it's going to be utilized in the same way. And I find myself still dialed in my Greek mode, maybe a little more than what the average client is expecting, and it can be a little off-putting.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, is that something to apologize for? It's just something I've lived, and I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
Like I am also... And my wife has pointed this out. I can tend to now, and I didn't always do this, talk over people, talk louder or interrupt. And if you didn't
noticed,
tell me about it, Jay. And if you didn't do that in Greece, they took you for a fool. It's unfortunate, but sometimes it's like the louder you speak, the more angry you must be, and if you're angry, you must have right, because you wouldn't be angry otherwise. You'd be a psychopath.
Interesting,
right?
Yeah.
So if you're really angry, people are like, okay, no, he's got to be right. He's super angry, and nobody just wakes up really angry. Like it's a whole weird way. Whereas, so then to know how to modulate that here in Canada, especially in my type of work where I'm with people all day long, is something that when your passion gets going about something, especially like we've been through the last 2 years, can be really hard to regulate. Because I truly only want the best for every single person I ever bump into, like hands down. I got one chance to live. I think Perry Farrell said it once of Jane's Addiction. I had to decide.
I was wondering who that name was like. Well, that sounds familiar.
The forces of good or the forces of evil. And there's a certain point in life you actually say, this is how I'm going to operate going forward. And I always want the best for every person I interact with, and particularly those I don't get a chance to interact with, like in poor countries in the world. Prior to getting to the industry, I wanted to be a lawyer, to not do to family law or that sort of thing, real estate law, to help people in countries that didn't have representation. It's really like my overarching drive as a human. And but it can be hard to modulate that passion after you used it to survive in your formative, I was like 30 to 40 years old when I was in Greece. Those are really formative years where like, okay, I'm running a business, I'm on my own, let's go, And to know how to modulate that back in a different environment, it's tricky.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, the difference between cultures and like how one would act in one might not necessarily be how they act.
Yeah, your adaptability can serve you like to positive, but can also then you have to readapt to where you are currently.
Yeah.
So I really sympathize with new immigrants now, because to a degree I feel it in myself.
Right.
It's like, how do I actually do things here?
Yeah.
In a way that's expected.
Yeah. One of the things about this is Canadians are sort of infamous for their apologies. You always sort of see this played up, and we do apologize a lot. When I think of, it's so subconscious. Like I don't know what it is about us as a culture that we do tend to apologize a lot more. Like it's almost like sorry is just, you can almost insert it as a comma in a lot of our dialogue. Like it's a weird.
How do you think that developed?
I don't know.
Is it from abundance?
Well, I think British culture, just because we're sort of an amalgamation of British culture and American culture,
True.
And like we get a little bit of each. But I don't know. Yeah, because and British, I really appreciate the British. Like, I don't know. I know this is like just summing a whole culture up in one sentence, but like they just seem so bloody polite, And it's like I always find myself having a good conversation.
You ever
with
seen
somebody.
Shaun of the Dead?
Yeah.
You got a little red on you. It's like blood from zombies. Should have a sit down. and to your point, that feels very Canadian, very familiar.
Right. And I think that's where we got it from. But it does seem to, I do feel like we use it a lot more. And I've like my girlfriend is American and she notices it too. Like I'll say it almost, just like, I think it is good though if you sort of bump into somebody, or if you're like, for example, if we're having a conversation and you're saying something and then I say something over top of you or whatever, and I'm like, oh, anyway, sorry. Like that kind of like thing, I think is fine. I think that's etiquette. And
yeah, it's almost like the authenticness of the apology built into the etiquette of the way you behave on a daily basis.
Right.
Yeah, it smooths things out.
Yeah, and and if you don't do it, I think there's ways that can be done and also still be polite. But it's not. I think as Canadians, we sort of almost evolved this like. apology
you
characteristic.
certainly notice its absence.
Yeah.
Like, there was a time we were in Rome and we were in one of these stores that had nothing but like nice, high quality wooden Pinocchios. And like all
it's like a great store.
Yeah. And this, and we're standing there and just admiring just the workmanship. And there was you know how those tills are in stores like that in Europe. They're just like a front, like a little desk sometimes, like a big transactional area. So there was an Italian woman sitting behind a desk, just kind of just minding her business. Sabina and I were just sort of looking at the shelf, admiring it. And the door was open because it was a hot day and they didn't have the air conditioner on, so to let the wind. And this lady walks in, and we must have been about 20 feet away from her. And she goes right up to the lady working at the toy store. And without a hi, how are you? Do you speak English? May I ask you a question? All the normal things we would do in British or Canadian society. She just looks and goes, do you got toys for kids? You know, and I tap Sabina's foot. It's like, shh, like in a sense, like don't speak English because I don't even want to help this person.
Yeah.
You know, like it was so rude right off the bat.
Right.
You know? Like, you know, it's just really like very egocentric, you know, like look where you are, you know.
Yeah.
You're in Italy. She's going to speak Italian. Ask her, you know, the proper, you know, norms of society, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
There was another time too where we were living in Greece and we were really quite Greek at this point in the sense that I hadn't been back to Canada in 6 years. So it was like, okay, you're just there and you're, like I was saying earlier, you're adapted to the climate you're in.
Right.
And if you're in a Greek grocery store and you are 2 feet from the shelving looking at the different types of ketchup, it's not uncommon for a person older than yourself, and by older I would say at this point like in their 60s, so different generation, would literally stand right in front of you in the two foot gap between you and the shelves and block your view. Like, what the heck just happened? And that etiquette would never happen in Canada. You'd give that polite space.
Yeah.
You know?
Interesting.
And then we were in Italy, in England one time. And have you ever been to Pret a Manger? Have you seen those sandwich stores they have in London, England?
Yeah.
They're fantastic. They're like basically fresh sandwiches on the go. Grab them, soup, coffee, and you're out. But like really nice quality. So I'm standing there overwhelmed by the beautiful selection of sandwiches in front of me. And I bumped into this British lady. And before I could turn and say, as a Canadian, Greek Canadian, oh, sorry, she turned to me and said, sorry. But I did the hitting.
Yeah.
I'm like, and I look, I'm like, oh my God, that's so Canadian. And I hadn't felt that because I'd been living in Greece for 10 years and that just simply wouldn't have happened.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely felt the cultural arc, as you're saying, from like, let's say Northern Europe, Scandinavia, England, through to Canada, versus like the Mediterranean arc where you go through all the countries around the Mediterranean. Completely different way of interacting.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and then when you live that moment, it's like, just like, I don't know, if you've never seen a palm tree, like you've seen it on TV, but you can't believe it's real when it happens in front of your eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So a lot of this, you know, the growth of this apologetic nature, at least outside of, I think some of it is etiquette, like, you know, we were talking about almost cultural, even the preemptive apology where it's just like you automatically assume you're at fault. So it's just like, yeah, I'm sorry, like bump into them, sorry. It's just a polite etiquette thing to do, at least in these cultures. And you know, it's not even better than, you know, like if there's a culture that isn't doing that, it's just a different culture, I think. You know, it doesn't necessarily, I don't know, for us it feels comfortable, but it isn't necessarily better, you know. I don't think. I think for us it feels more comfortable.
It's all about what you're used to. I certainly, after a while in Greece, appreciated the more direct approach to things too.
Right.
And a sorry can be very like, are you really sorry?
Right.
You know,
what does that
are you
even
just
mean
saying
anymore?
it like, how you doing? And then before they act, I'm actually not having a good day.
Right.
Kind of you just fine.
Yeah.
You just move on with it, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, like anything, it's a matter of taste, and you can take it too far. But I do think it, in a nice way, it signifies that you live in a society that has the space and time through the abundance of resources to even be able to feel something like remorse in order to apologize.
Yeah.
Because if you're just, you know, trying to do survival mode, which, you know, some of the Mediterranean countries more so than the North are, you don't even have space for that energy to like ooze out of you.
Right.
You know, it's just you have to repress it. It's like when you're downtown, you know, living in a suburb versus living in a downtown core. And when you live in a suburb and first go downtown and you see a lot of homeless people and it's like you're aghast, like, oh my goodness, I want to help everybody. But then when you actually start commuting daily, you can't stop at every single person along the way because you'll never make it to your destination.
Right.
So there's a certain like evolutionary product in there too.
Yeah. So would you say, so I guess, you know, to feel more like these apologies that are based on genuine remorse or genuine guilt, like, this is, you know, as we said earlier, kind of a distinctly human characteristic that I don't know how you would sort of replicate in an AI. I wonder, like guilt is an interesting thing. No,
Yeah.
like, I mean, evolutionarily
You sound
speaking,
like the devil. Guilt is an interesting thing. Have you tried any?
there's this concept of like I think like the evolution of guilt is like got to be something to do with like communal. You know, we want to be part of the group because groups keep us alive, and so
Sure.
in order for us to feel. Well, I don't know though, because like I mean that would be certainly an apology, because you'd say like you would want to say that you're sorry for something that you did wrong because you want to be accepted to the group again, right? So like if you just thinking back to the prehistoric era, like if you're like in a cave with a bunch of people and you're like, you ate more than your fair allocation of squirrel the night before or whatever, and then the group is all kind of angry at you. Maybe at that point it's like, I'm sorry about that, or like just so because you don't want the group to be mad at you. You want to be excommunicated or canceled by that group, right? So it's like you want to apologize. So I guess in that way, I can understand the evolution of an apology, but guilt seems more sort of intrinsic, right? Like it seems like you can apologize without feeling guilt, right? Like you can just do
I remember my first guilty experience. Do you remember your first guilty experience at all, where you just actually felt guilty? Like, oh, I really shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's interesting, right?
I remember something. I don't know if it was my first one, but
I was just a little over 3, not 4 yet. And it's a funny little story. Maybe this is my apology, but it was more guilt than apology, because you're 3.5,
Right.
And we were at the local corner store, and I had seen this is really like juvenile, but I'd seen a Fred Flintstone Hot Wheels car. Right. All the intricate details, the wood at the front, like this looks amazing. I remember the moment, like admiring the detail.
Right.
And at that age, you're watching the cartoons, like, my God, like I laughed.
Did it have like feet at the bottom or something?
No.
Because then they run.
Yeah, but it had the character, but it looked really good. I should actually Google it. I've never thought about, maybe I have a repressed memory, right? Because I've Googled everything else from my youth and I haven't touched that one.
Yeah.
I remember lying on the sofa and my mother and father going to me like, Dimitri, like, where did you get this car? Because they didn't buy it. How did this make it into the house? Right. I had managed to take it out of the package. Yeah, I was entrepreneurial, but not at 3.
Your dad probably would have been impressed. Yeah, like, good. That's what they did in my time.
Yeah,
you started working early.
Yeah, stealing's not the crime. Getting caught is. Yeah, and I remember, sitting on the sofa, and they were asking me very carefully and quietly, like, where did you get this from? Mm-hmm. And I remember turning inwards to the in part of the sofa and not wanting to turn around, not wanting to say where I got it from. It was just a natural instinct, like I've done something wrong.
Yeah.
And I remember my parents being like very gentle about it. They were very like concerned,
We were 3, like.
Yeah.
But they might have even thought maybe somebody gave it to you or something. It's some weird thing.
Never thought about that because I was overwhelmed with the feeling that I did something wrong.
Yeah.
So my father, though, I guess I told him the truth because then he got me up and made me, and him and I walked back to the same corner store and had me hand it over to the store owner and say, I'm sorry, I took this from your store. And I remember that feeling going, I'm in trouble and my dad is doing, and mom, but my dad walked me there. He's doing the right thing. And it's important to do the right thing. And I don't want to feel like this again.
At the time, you even thought he's doing the right thing?
Oh, yeah. 100%. Okay. The morality was built in. Like, this is wrong what I did. It was probably like I even remember the feelings like a childish sort of like animal instinct. Right. Like resource gathering, sort of like more stuff, right? And and I remember thinking that's not the higher way of being. And my parents were showing me, and that's why they're parents and I'm a child. And they were showing me this is the right way. I had totally screwed up. And I remember that, and it really kind of like guided a lot of my childhood years after that.
Yeah.
To this
that's
point,
cool.
like I actually gives me chills thinking about it because I remembered the juxtaposition of like my animal instinct versus like what it means to be educated coming from my parents. And to always pick that path if you can, not the animal side.
Right.
And I've never been turned on by money and like flashy things. Like I think it really, really put me on a different course. Like,
well, like you said, you also had the morality.
The behavior
in the
matters, not the material items.
Yeah, yeah.
In all instances, you know. Sorry, what were we going to say?
Well, you had that morality sort of built in. You were saying even at the time you felt guilty for doing it, and
yeah, I guess it wasn't hard to turn on, but I knew I'd let myself and them down.
Yeah, yeah.
And by extension, society, because I had to look at that man in the eyes and say, I'm sorry, you know, and hand it over with my little 3-year-old fingers, you know,
Well, that probably would have been adorable to the person at the time, but
just like you say, when someone says earlier, like when they make an apology and just the act of making an apology diffuses the entire situation.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure that's exactly what happened there.
For sure. Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I don't know. It's amazing, and parenting is education and parenting is a huge factor. Nature versus nurture. That's actually like both aspects come out because I, through nature, felt it was the wrong thing, and through nurture, they guided me in the right direction.
I think what's really important about this stuff too is it's almost like a communal thing where it refreshes people's faith in humanity. You know, where like I'm sure when the store owner saw you giving this car back with your dad beside you, he was like, you know, part of them would be like, this is good. This is the way it should be.
And maybe more so because my dad being the immigrant with a bit of an accent.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what the nationality would have been, origin of the person working the store. But things were much more homogeneous back in the day. You know, we're talking like the 70s at this point in Canada. Be like, you know what? These are good people. You know, who knows how he interpreted the entire situation, not just the child, but like the father brought the child back.
Yeah.
That's amazing, right? There you go back to the fundamental core values that, for all our talk about diversity, the shared fundamental values is what keeps us unified, and we don't just decompose into fragmented subjective experiences.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really interesting. I find the whole idea of uniquely human characteristics interesting. Like, I don't know how you simulate that kind of thing.
Maybe through embedding in action. Like, because a computer may say it's guilty, but again, like an apology, it requires action, or it's hollow.
Well, it requires a feeling of there needs to be remorse behind it, right? Because if you don't have the remorse, then the apology, like you said, is hollow. Or it's like, I mean, you can certainly make a AI say they're sorry or whatever.
So it's almost like a trifecta. You got the remorse, then apology, then the action. And if we're just getting apologies in modern society without any action at the end and any real remorse to begin with, well, welcome to the internet age.
My girlfriend has a way, I've certainly found this out the hard way, of what she wants in an apology. So for her, just saying you're sorry is not good enough. It's like, so it's like, it needs to have three things. You have to say what you're sorry for, and it has to be specific. So it can't be just like, I'm sorry that you're upset or whatever. It has to be like, I'm sorry for this action. And it has to be, why you're sorry. For example, it'd be like, well, because I hurt your feelings. I don't know where she got it from. It's a template, like if this is some psychological template or something, but it makes sense. I can understand why you would want to go through these steps.
And you're going to tell me after 50 times it feels natural.
yeah.
I don't have to look at the template much anymore.
right. I got it down to a science. And then the last one is, which I think is talking about your action point, where it's like, what are the steps that one is prepared to make so this won't happen again, kind of thing, right? So like, I wonder about, for example, like the residential schools, things like that, where it's like maybe, you build that in. It's like, how can we make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen again? What do you put in law that's going to, like those kind of, I mean, this actually is kind of a good template for what an apology should be. I mean, it's important to make sure that it consists of that last bit, because otherwise,
otherwise the apology has no integrity.
Right.
Right.
So your story about your car, and I think my story about the car, I think those both taught us life lessons. Like my behavior has changed as a result, and yours probably has too. So
both
it's like,
involved an automobile.
Yeah, funny enough. Yeah. Yep. And yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, we could do, hours on apologies, but it's like I also don't want to just sort of reveal every.
But integrity is a big part of it too, I think. Like maybe this all actually comes. Can you build an AI that has integrity?
Right.
These are really complicated. And they have to just be like sincere.
But they couldn't ever have real integrity, right? Because you couldn't have if it had integrity, that's another, sort of human characteristic. Like it's like dignity. Like, do you feel like is a computer proud of itself? Is it you know what I mean? Can you simulate pride? Like these are things we'll do like the 7 deadly sins of humanity or something. Like what, I just don't think that.
Well, because you can, to your point, it has to be able, the AI has to be capable of doing evil, but chooses to do good.
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of programming.
I would like to have a computer scientist on here and explain to me programmatically how you would make that happen. You know what I mean? How you would, because I don't believe it's possible. I just don't believe it. Like I can't. Like I can usually conceptualize things, like I can think outside the box. But here it's like, what, how do you endow an artificial intelligence with those kinds of human characteristics?
Wasn't it said before, of all the things we've ever found in the universe, sorry, whether that be black holes and gravitational, this and that and the other thing, the most complicated thing we have ever found in the entire universe is the human mind.
Yeah. That's true.
And we got 7-something billion of them on Earth. And we still have just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
So I really think we're way farther away than we could ever possibly imagine. And I know, who's the famous guy, Hari, the Jewish man who's always a professor about AI. He's always talking about, we are the new gods. We will be doing, the Hari, Hari, I believe his last name.
I don't know. I don't recognize the name.
Yeah, you have to. He's part of the World Economic Forum, and he's always at all these big events, and he's always talking about how, everything we see now will be replaced by AI in the very near future.
Right.
And just like we used to say, God created all this, we are the new gods. And just something about it to me just gives me like this creepy vibe, I don't know, I would be like a Jewish slave in Egypt, and he's like the pharaoh, commanding a certain amount of knowledge. But
well, really in this case, you'd be the pharaoh.
He feels like the pharaoh.
No, but I mean, you would also be the pharaoh because it would be the AI who would be the slaves.
Yeah, but he's coming at it from a perspective that he has the inner circle of information that will be then disseminated down to us. Right. And that's why he's telling us this is what the future will be.
Right.
And I'm probably like, oh, okay, I'm really scared, kind of thing.
Right, yeah. Probably not a good idea to make slaves of the thing that are inevitably going to overpower you at some day.
Exactly. Yeah, you should check him out. Hari, I believe is his last name.
Check him out.
Bone chilling. And for me, my instinct is like, this man is a salesman and he's trying to terrorize people and perhaps means it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I really do think there's a lot of, positive, well, certainly there's a lot of positive applications, even simple, trivial ones. Like, I mean, I like the adaptive search and stuff like that. Like, I know that it's
convenient.
Yeah, I think it's always like, as long as people are balancing this idea that you have to give up some of your privacy to be able to have it, as long as it's all on the table, I have no problem with it. Even if it's in terms and conditions, I'm okay with it. Like, don't make it, 1,000 pages long, but just as long as it's reasonable. I think it's helpful to have some of this stuff, but you just have to be able to decide for yourself what it is that you're doing. And I think that's, but anyway.
I did just pull it up. His name is Yuval Noah Harari, Harari.
Oh, okay.
And definitely it really ties into our episode. So for our listeners, I would check him out and think about that in terms of just the complexity that we're talking about here today.
Right, yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's it. We'll just wrap it up. Thanks for listening once again, everybody. God, you've been great. I would ask you to feel free to share this episode if you liked it, and tell all your friends about it. And we hope to see you here in the next 2 weeks. And we try to make these episodes consistent, so they're every 2 weeks. So there's just this built-in, I don't know, consistency somehow.
Algorithm?
Yeah, just something that's like, you know,
human
algorithm, depend
algorithm
on it or whatever. That keeps us honest and keeping us making episodes and as well, so it keeps us on track. All right, no, thanks very much for listening today, and I hope you guys all have a great time doing whatever you're doing today.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.